Let's do a quick review of exponents. We'll cover this in algebra in quite a bit more detail. This will give you a heads up. 2 squared. So this is asking me to do 2 times 2. 2 times 2 equals 4. Where people get confused is they think it means 2 times this number. Because in 2's case, it is for both scenarios. What if I had 3 squared? If I do 3 times 2, the answer is 6, but that's not what they're asking me to do. They're asking me to do 3 times itself twice. So 3 squared is 9. So if I have 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, I need to shorten that and make it easier to use. So how many 3's do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4. So I can write that as 3 to the 4th power. Okay. So on your calculator, you can do 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. Or you can use this button that says y to the x. So I would type in 3, then I would type y to the x, 4 equals 81. Okay. Now check, see if you get the same thing doing it the long way. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27, times 3 is 81. So the little y to the x button can be used with exponents. Okay. It's probably going to be helpful if you can start to memorize some of the exponents for the most commonly used numbers. I would say 2, 3, 4, and 5. You may want to memorize some of those. So 4, if I ask you what 4 squared is, remember that means 4 times 4 equals 16. 4 cubed, 4 times 4 times 4 is equal to 64. 5 squared, so 5 times 5 equals 25. 5 cubed, 5 times 5 times 5, 125. So exponents. The other half of the exponent idea is this symbol right here. That's called the square root sign. So let's say I have 16 underneath my square root sign. This is asking me which number times itself is equal to 16. So if I memorize, then I know that that's 4. 4 times 4 equals 16. Or I can rewrite that as 4 squared. They all mean the same thing. What if I have the square root of 25? So what times itself equals 25? 5. So I can rewrite that. 5 squared equals 25. Or the square root of 25 equals 5. If I have a little cube root, so if there's not a number here, it just means squared. I can add a number in front. That means the cubed root. So let's say I have the cubed root of 8. So what times itself is equal to 8? 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. So the cubic root of 8 is equal to 2. Okay. Let's talk for a minute about positive and negative. 2 positives times each other are always going to be a positive. If I have 2 negatives times each other, they will also always be positive. So if I have negative 2 times negative 2, negative 2 times negative 2 is a positive 4. Times a negative 2 is a negative 8. If I did that again, times the negative 2. 2 times 8, 16. Negative times the negative turns into a positive. I can keep going and we'll see a pattern here. So if I'm dealing with an even number, my answer will always be positive. If I'm dealing with an odd number, then my answer can be either positive or negative, depending on what I'm working with. So if I have negative 2 cubed, negative 2 cubed, negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4, times negative 2 is a negative 8. 2 cubed is 8. If I take the cubic root of 8, it's 2. If I take the cubic root of negative 8, it can be a negative 2. I can never take the square of a negative number because squares are always made up of 2 factors. So if those are both positive, it's going to be positive. If they're both negative, it's still going to be positive. So this up here, if I had something that looked like that, the square root of a negative 16 is not a real number. I would say not real. Because anything times itself is always going to be positive. What if I have the square root of a negative 25? What would our answer be for that? So what times itself is 25? 5. Can I take a negative square? No. Okay. So not real. What if I have the cubic root of a negative 64? So what times itself is 64? 4. So if I have 4 times 4 times 4, if it's positive, then my answer in here is going to be positive. If it's negative, right, a negative times a negative is a positive 16. Times the negative 4 is negative 64. So the shortcut way is to look at this number right here. If this is even, then it must be positive. If this number is odd, it can be either positive or negative. So squares and square roots, cubes and cube roots. So the square root of 49, if you don't know that one off the top of your head, grab your calculator and type in 49. Then you want to hit the button that has the square root sign over the X. It should say 7. Or if you have, let's say you have 23 squared. You can't do that off the top of your head. 23 times 23. Grab your calculator, type in 23, and hit the X with the little 2 superscript, so X squared. Hit that button. Your answer is 529. So 23 squared is 529. So go through and review addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Squares, square roots, cubes, cube roots. Make sure you're comfortable with the order of operations. I would memorize this acronym if I were you. PEMDAS, right? P parentheses, E exponents, M multiply, D divide, A addition, S subtraction. Always work from left to right. And if you have brackets, what's the rule? Start on your most interior and work your way out. Any questions? You can find the homework assignment on your handout. It starts on page 28 in the text.